Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Melissa Bird, and I'm here to welcome you back to the Thinnest Veil podcast. Um, I am so excited today that my new friend, I hope I can call you friend, Jay, is here with us today to talk about their work in the world regarding human trafficking, which is a big topic of conversation these days. Um, so I'm so excited that you're here, and I would love it if you would introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here as well. My name is Jay Benke. I'm a child abduction and sex trafficking survivor. I was trafficked here in the Pacific Northwest, and currently I am the National Engagement Specialist for the Sex Trade Survivor Caucus. We are an all survivor organization that creates space for survivors to impact change in policy and legislation. We are a big fan of nothing about us without us. It's so important to have lived experience at the table. And our organization actually was founded here in Oregon. Initially, it was a group of survivors out here who have been engaging in not only policy work, but direct service and support for trafficking victims and survivors. And there was a bill that was introduced here by a wealthy sex buyer. And so we all came together to speak out against the harm that this bill would cause. And we were successful in defeating that piece of legislation, which was really exciting. And from there, we kind of formalized and it became an organization here in the Pacific Northwest and then expanded to a national organization. It's really exciting.
You know, when I was the lobbyist for Planned Parenthood of Utah, a lot of times I would have people call and say, I'm really worried about this piece of legislation. Is there anything I can do to help? And I would say, yeah, you can come up to the Hill with me and tell your story. And what you are talking about is why I still love and adore policy and policy work, because it's the power of our stories that truly impacts how elected officials operate with legislation. Oh, I just got the full body chills. It's it I don't think people quite understand the potency of their stories when it comes to impacting legislation. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about why right now, as you know, we've got the Epstein files in the media, and that like this topic is actually coming up as a course of conversation. If you could talk about why you think people, how can you make the link for people about policy and accessibility to impacting elected officials by storytelling?
I was really fortunate this last year to attend a policy roundtable in DC, and there was 12 senators and representatives who came and they did a briefing. It was a small group of survivors and folks working in policy work around trafficking, um, all at the table. And there was one senator who like it took everything in my power not to just like standing ovation right there at the moment. And he made sure to drive home that like all the work that everybody does, everybody collectively there, all of our efforts matter. But what really moved the needle, what gave them the ability to get more sponsors on a piece of legislation, to get committees to support the legislation, um, it all revolved around storytelling. That they really needed to speak to people with lived experience to hear what is actually happening and how systems are interacting and either helping or hindering, in order for them to be able to leave that space and carry on the message through storytelling, to motivate folks out there to do what we need them to do to protect trafficking victims. You know, trafficking is the second fastest growing crime in the United States. It is easier to traffic somebody than it is to sell narcotics, because you get arrested for a narcotics bust. First off, there's more funding around narcotics arrests and
Right.
busts.
Sure. Of course.
It's easier to prosecute than trafficking. Trafficking is very hard to prosecute. So there's a lot of motivation for drug trafficking to be pursued, but also they can lock up the evidence. Like, you can't lock up a trafficking victim, though though some people try. But in theory, you can't just lock up a trafficking victim, the person who's being bought and sold, the same way that you would lock up, say, the narcotics, seize and lock up those narcotics. So there's a lot more benefit for criminals to traffic people over substances. It's crazy.
Every time I talk to you, my head explodes just a little bit more. Um, I've been in this world for a long time as a social worker and an advocate. And of course, um, when I was doing my work with Planned Parenthood in particular, and then when I left and was getting my PhD down in Los Angeles, I had touch points with trafficking throughout my career. And um, I'm wondering if you could explain to people, I think we hear the term human trafficking or the sex trade, right? Or even the slave trade with field workers and other folks. Um, I'm wondering if you could explain for people what exactly human trafficking is and bring it a little more home for people about who y'all are, who are you, right? As not just as survivors, but also as people who are in this system.
Yeah. So first off, there is labor trafficking and sex trafficking, which all fall under the umbrella of human trafficking. My organization and my lived experience is sex trafficking, though there are often frequent intersections between labor trafficking and sex trafficking. I think I saw a statistic that said it was 53% of labor trafficking victims are also sex trafficked, and they'll be sex trafficked to the labor traffickers, but also to some of the fellow trafficking victims. So there's just a lot of crazy interactions and intersections in trafficking. But for sex trafficking, it is the use of force, fraud, or coercion from a third party over a trafficking victim where they're selling sex and they're trading it for essentially something of value. The best way to think about it is the intersection of sex, money, and violence. Like, that's the
Yeah.
biggest indicators that you can look for. But also, if there is a minor, no matter what, even if they do not have a conventional trafficker, any person under 18 is automatically 100% a trafficking victim under the
Yeah.
law,
Yeah.
and which is traditionally protected by what's called a safe harbor law,
Yeah.
meaning that if you are under 18 years old, you cannot be prosecuted for prostitution, which is there's a federal law around this. But unfortunately, minors still are absolutely being prosecuted for prostitution and commingling crimes around trafficking. I think Piper Lewis is a terrible but great example, 15 years old, um, and was assaulted by a buyer, ended his life, and was forced to pay $150,000 in restitution to his family, and had a deferred sentence of up to 20 years in prison as a 15-year-old. And she's not alone. It's not rare. I myself was a prosecuted minor for being trafficked. But so you have child trafficking victims that are being arrested, prosecuted. Unfortunately, Oregon is a state that does not have safe harbor, so it's something we're working on here. And then there are also, obviously, adults have to meet that kind of threshold, which is really difficult to prove. And also, trafficking victims don't know they're being trafficked. I think that's probably like one of the biggest problems out there. There's a lot of pro sex trade narratives and propaganda that are out there. And so, even myself, it took me 20 years to identify that I had been trafficked. I thought that it was all my fault. Even after being abducted and trafficked, I still thought that it was my fault. And so it was like this shameful thing that I did.
I don't want to breeze by that because I think it's really important for folks to understand. Um, so when you talk about how a lot of people don't know they're being trafficked, can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, part of the mechanism of the abuse and control around trafficking is They need to be able to have their victim go out, earn the money, bring it back. So part of the messaging and narrative that makes that possible is that you are culpable and you are making these decisions. And so people think like, I've had people ask me, why didn't you run? Why didn't you call 911? But run for what and run to who? I'm going to get in trouble. Um, and what am I asking them for help for? Because I am actually a criminal. So
Right.
I'm a criminal. I'm making this decision to do this thing. And the proof of that is that I haven't run and I haven't called the police. So obviously, I'm not going to call the police and say I'm making this decision to break the law. Will
Right.
you help me? So trafficking victims are not seeking help. They're not going to do hand signals and be, pleading for assistance and be oh so grateful when you.
Oh, there's that white savior complex coming in from all these
Yeah,
white
no,
feminist ladies.
I'm not oh so humble. I'm not oh so grateful. And actually, I'm going to be venomous because you are putting my
Yeah.
life in danger. I couldn't put words to it. I couldn't really understand rationally what was happening when law enforcement did intercede. But I knew that I needed to try to get away from them as soon as possible so that I could get back to my trafficker because that's where the safety was.
Right. And how old were you when the police interceded?
I was 17
And how long had you been?
of just over a year. Yeah, and they were on their way to Las Vegas. That was the plan.
Mhm.
Because once we got into Vegas, we would just kind of blend in with
Yeah.
the full decrim folks, and we would never really be found like within that space. They had a usual route. They had been through there before and taken other girls. I was one of multiple children
Of course.
who they had on that trip. And then when we were, busted, essentially, I was charged with a felony. They charged me with aggravated money laundering for taking the money from the buyers and giving it to the traffickers. And giving it to the traffickers. But the purpose of this charge was to intimidate me to participate in their prosecution.
Yeah.
There was no services, there was nothing there for me. So I am in an emergency situation. What I really need is triage. I need care. And
Yes.
then I could participate potentially if I chose to in their case. But that wasn't the order of things. It was we're going to be scarier than the traffickers, which is just literally not possible because they'll
No.
my life. um, so we're going to be scarier than the traffickers. We're going to intimidate you. You're going to participate. We'll win our case. That's what they care about. There's no services there. And then
And you can move on your merry way because we
my,
saved you.
yeah. But in the meantime, they took a plea deal or made a plea deal with my traffickers because there was two traffickers working together. They did a plea deal within like a day or two. And they took that plea deal in which they served 10 days. These are grown men kidnapping, raping, trafficking children across the country. They each served 10 days for their plea deal and then had to leave the state. So now my ability to testify off the table, and the only thing that I'm left with is a felony charge that I'm now facing.
And this happens all the time, doesn't it?
Yeah, this
This
happens.
is common.
Yes, absolutely. And so I was advised to plead guilty by my public defender. And I was given 2 years of probation where I was supposed to like not do anything else. I guess not get kidnapped again. That was, a big problem of mine. I have a habit of that. So they made sure to let me know, don't do that. And so, I'm pretty lucky. I'm a little blue-eyed white girl from the country who, when I came out of that system, I was still assumed by the general public to be smart, good, worthy, safe, all of those things. And so I was able to then go forward and get employment and just kind of pretend that this thing didn't happen and like bury it really deep down, and still try to move forward and make a life. But I ended up serving 40 days. So
And they only serve 10?
I served 4 times more time than my
Shut the front fucking door, Jay.
yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
And it's one
Okay.
of those things that's really terrible. Like, that's terrible information. And
Yeah.
then simultaneously, I also recognize, again, my privilege that comes into play in this whole processing of what happened. But those 40 days were terrible. They also were going to be terrible with my traffickers. It wasn't going to be a good 40 days no matter what. But the 41st day was very different. That 41st day and the way that I was able to go forward was very different. I do not think that victims should be arrested. I do not think that cases need to be prioritized. A victim does not owe anybody anything because they are a victim of a crime. It is not their responsibility to take on the job of law enforcement and get a prosecution of a trafficker. That is not their job. Their job is to heal if that's what they want to do. They don't even owe us healing. Like, they don't owe us anything. So I do not believe in that. And I simultaneously, human trafficking is underfunded, underserved, operating in extreme scarcity. We have 8 beds in the entire United States that are slated for male victims of trafficking in the whole country, 8 beds. So when I say underserved, it is extreme, the need. And when we do not have resources and tools and other pathways, people will make decisions. And some of those decisions might be to incarcerate victims so that they can try to get a testimony because they don't have an advocate to work with. They don't have a safe space to send them. They have nothing. So, and that's not the decisions that all people are making. There's no,
No.
generalization
No,
over
and
everybody. But also, there's a lot of rural areas out here that really, they don't have anything. If you're lucky, they might have a domestic violence shelter.
maybe.
Potentially, yeah. And is it going to serve that age range of this victim? There's so many caveats in which people don't get served. And then in that situation, what do we expect for law enforcement to do? Because trafficking is a crime. Law enforcement needs to be involved in a crime. And we're hoping prosecute traffickers and buyers. So what are we expecting them to do when there is nothing else?
Yeah, I think, you know, oh, there's so many things going through my head. Um, you made a very important point about being blonde-haired and blue-eyed, right? When we're talking about missing and murdered Indigenous people, who are we've been trafficking, my ancestors for 500 years, right? Like this is not new at all.
Yeah.
When you talk about immigrant people, um, and how they are trafficked, not just for labor, but also for sex. Um, when we talk about any other marginalized group of people, queer people, other people of color, the 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 thing that just rises up in me is that we have an idolized victim
Yeah.
and we have an idolized perpetrator, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if those people don't fit the narrative of the bad guy and the victim, this whole thing becomes even more multi-layered and complicated, right?
Yeah.
And then you add on top of that the fact that we already do a really shit job of helping victims of rape, of domestic violence, of reproductive coercion. Like we do a really bad job of that anyway. And then you add on top of that the layer of trafficking and whether or not people actually want to seek help because it's just a completely different, it's so different.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what I really want people to hear is the complexities of this and how people can actually be helpful because we were kind of laughing earlier but like yell really loud, hey mom, how are you, and someone's going to come and save you, right? Like,
Yeah.
could you talk a little bit about the complexities of this, the diversity of victims and also the diversity of perpetrators, because I think that's really important. You've used a term a couple of times about the sellers and the buyers.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit? I know I'm asking many questions at once, but could you talk about the complexities of the identities of these things?
Yeah. I think, you know, um, traffickers are looking for vulnerabilities that can be exploited. And I think it's important for us to recognize that all of us have vulnerabilities that can be exploited. Do you need love?
Yeah.
Do you need a house? Do you need food? We all have, this is, it doesn't, victims are not any different than the rest of us. And it really could be all of us. And simultaneously, there are people who systemically have more vulnerabilities and barriers created for them. And so they often are intersecting with traffickers more frequently than maybe the average person. So the majority of people in prostitution, which we use prostitution as an umbrella term, and prostitution, it's we acknowledge it is a system. Prostitution is a system, and under prostitution, there is a spectrum of consent, all the way from people who identify as participating enthusiastically, enthusiastic consent, through exploitation, all the way to trafficking. So there is a spectrum of consent. All of it is under the umbrella of prostitution. And anything that we do around legislation, if it's impacting prostitution, it's going to impact all of these people. So we really can't separate it. But the majority of people in prostitution, it's black and brown bodies, and people who are not white, not cis het white people, are more likely to receive far worse abuses and treatment at the hands of sex buyers. A person in the system of prostitution is 200 times more likely to be killed than a person who is not in the system of prostitution. It is extremely violent and extremely dangerous. So, and black and brown bodies take the brunt of this abuse. So they are more likely to be abused and violated. They're also more likely to be paid less. So they're earning less money, receiving more harm. And then when there are intersections with law enforcement, then they are more likely to receive a much harsher punishment. So
Right.
it's everything that's terrible about the trade, on steroids, just amplified, which leads to all of the issues that we have. So whenever we have these intersections of like logging, forestry, any of these big, where there's going to be big groups of men, that's why we talk about major sporting events. Yeah, all these things where there's large groups of men, then you're going to have a larger population of prostituted people. And so that becomes especially challenging when we're talking about logging and oil drilling and all of those things, which are happening on and near indigenous lands. So you have that major intersection that is happening there. And we also, we use the word trafficker because that's what they are. Brothel owners, pimps, all those folks are all traffickers. We also use the term sex buyer. We don't use the term John at all. John is like, oh, I get to be a whore, but he gets to be the everyman. How fun. Yeah. Like, no, I don't think we're doing that. I don't think so. So we call them, sex buyers or sex acts buyers. And we also call it the sex trade. We acknowledge that the sex trade is rooted in the slave trade. Prostitution was brought to the United States as an act of war and colonization to harm black and brown bodies. And also, sex rape has always been a spoil of war. And so, there's that intersection where the system of prostitution was brought to these lands as an act of war and colonization. So we honor that history we call it the sex trade, not the sex industry or adult industry. We try to stick to that language. I don't know if I answered many of those questions.
You did. You absolutely did. Thank you. I super appreciate it. I think this is I know there are a lot of people who are going to listen to this whose heads are going to explode all over the place.
Yeah.
Yes. Could you talk a minute about brothels? Because I think people have this image in their head that is something of the ancient past.
Yeah.
Right? I kind of feel like they have like this sort of Western movie image of a brothel kind of a thing. But when you and I initially talked, that was one thing that really it hit me.
Yeah.
So could you talk about the fact that brothels still exist?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a mixed bag. People get this like saloony, old timey vibes. This like, shoot 'em up, yuck, yuck party.
Yeah.
And then also some people have this really like positive belief around what brothels are, like, oh, under legalization, everything is fantastic. It's just two consenting adults, and we're regulating and making sure that there's safety and all of these things. When what we know about brothels is that the conditions are actually far worse. So traffickers will use brothels as punishment for trafficking victims. So if their victim starts getting out of line and is not listening, running away, not doing what they're supposed to, they will send their victim to sell sex at the brothel, because at the brothel, you have to stay there. Once you get there and you check in, you have to stay there. You get tested for STDs when you get there. And if you leave, who knows what you're doing when you're out there. So once you check in, you can't check out until you're done earning money. Then you have to wait. There's a waiting period for your STD panel to come back. And then the house is setting the rules. The house is setting the pricing. The house is listening. There's cameras. There's audio recording so that they can hear. They want to make sure that you're not turning down a buyer, that you're not turning down services, and that you're doing what you're supposed to do when you're in there. They have to pay a house fee out of their money. They also have to pay their trafficker. They have to pay for their food. They have to pay for rent. They are sleeping in the exact same room that they're servicing buyers in. So you're just,
The house fees on top of the rent?
yeah, yeah. It's a form of debt bondage. We see this in our strip clubs as well. They do the same type of thing. They'll put girls on really terrible shifts where you're not going to make a bunch of money, charge them a bunch of stage fees, so that now you owe the house. So now you're locked into having to come back and kind of be under their control and under their whims. And so brothels, strip clubs, all these places where they're selling these kind of sex acts, they work with traffickers
Right.
because they want to keep a fresh stock of girls coming in and traveling. And there might be a sacrificial lamb every now and then of turning in a trafficker to appear to participate and be doing things on the up and up. But they very much work with traffickers. Traffickers shop at brothels. Traffickers shop at strip clubs. So even if you are a person who is there, enthusiastically consenting, that might not be the case for very long, because there will be traffickers there attempting to recruit you. And if you don't agree, then you can be beaten, robbed, threatened, harassed, not able to work there. There's a lot of consequences that happen when they're trying to, it's called knocking, but when they're trying to like take you essentially in one way or another. But there's the biggest problem that we're seeing here in Oregon right now is the rapid explosion of massage parlors.
Right.
There is an extreme need for culturally specific services for these folks, and pathways to intervene that are not causing harm to the victims.
Right.
So, and negotiating what that looks like. And this is happening across the country. The populations that they're seeing differ from area to area. But this has been a huge problem. One of the it's a brothel. Like, this is a brothel. They're selling, even if it's under the term massage parlor, they're selling sex acts. That's the purpose.
Um, there was, I remember, because I'm a woman of a certain age, I'm 51, right? And I remember the feminist movement in like the late 90s, early 2000s. We were all getting wound up in the prostitution is awesome. And, like if you're fully consenting, like you're saying, like women should be able to do whatever they want, gay men should be able to do whatever they want, right? Like those are the two populations that were really talked about then. Um, and it strikes me, I feel like this is so much more nuanced than the sex positivity folks are willing to discuss.
Yeah.
How has that whole everybody's consenting, everything is fine, we got to decriminalize all this stuff, how is that impacting the sex trade?
This is that's like the hardest part, I think, because like these are our siblings. People who are in the trade are our siblings, and when we're talking about policy work and we're navigating what is going to cause the least harm to everybody under that umbrella, we are considering all of these realities and trying to figure out those least harm. pathways. Um, and at this, so we also have like a duty of care, right? Because we have been in the shoes of a lot of these folks where we're like, I am doing this and I love it. And I would never want to do anything else. And this is the best thing ever. And honestly, just leave me alone. Like, just leave me alone is always the thing that I wanted when just the worst things are happening to me. Domestic violence, relationship, like, just don't look. Just like leave it alone. Just, I got it, you know? But I didn't necessarily have it. Anyways, so we've been there, and none of us ever want to do or say something that is going to create a barrier for somebody else leaving in the future. I don't ever want to say anything that is going to cause anybody harm to the point where they're going to, really just double down. You don't know and feel like under attack. So that makes it, challenging. And at the same time, they our siblings don't necessarily have that same perspective. So it can get really heated, and trying to like manage that temperature and keep it from getting heated is tough. At the same time, like, we're showing up to testify for policy work, and we're talking about all the things that we've been through. And then we're having to hear sex buyers show up to testify. Can you imagine being a trafficking victim testifying for a piece of legislation, and then there's sex buyers right next to you testifying? It's really, and you're listening to this sex buyer narrative about how wonderful and amazing and it was for them. I'm permanently disabled as a result of my trafficking experience. I've had to have 9 surgeries. I'm in constant pain. I have a very heavy pain medication regimen. My ability to earn a living is permanently impacted for the rest of my life. But it gave Steve more confidence. So I guess it was like really worth it in the end. It's it's like sort of this ridiculousness, and it's incredibly insulting. And then also to hear the invalidation of your experiences, as well as pimp narratives, because a lot of the language that is grooming America of like, this is sex positive, this is two consenting adults, there are safe ways to do it. Never mind that people in prostitution have TBIs at the same rate as professional boxers. Never mind that. It's
Wait. Do not gloss over that. Say that again. Slower for the people in the back.
Traumatic brain injuries are extremely common, and people in prostitution have traumatic brain injuries at the same rates as professional boxers. We have no safety equipment. We have no safety. There's no ref to call time, we don't have any of that benefit. So just like disregard what we know. Disregard that we know that the sex trade is racist. Disregard that we know it is homophobic, anti-trans, anti-queer, extremely oppressive, beneficial for white men of means. Disregard all of that. It's super empowering and amazing. That is the same language that groomers use on their victims. Like, traffickers use these exact same narratives when grooming victims. So it's really not surprising that it has been so effective, because this is trafficker narrative. Like, this is the same thing that lures victims in.
I can't. So there's two things. There's 2 titles for this podcast. One is Nothing About Us Without Us, but the other one that I really think is going to win is The Grooming of America, because literally, Jay, you have just like so many things that I've experienced as a social worker and an advocate and a policymaker and an activist and a feminist.
Yeah.
And like someone who has been active in a lot of different spaces, the level of grooming, I'm obsessed with cults. I grew up in Utah, like the largest cult ever, right? Like I listen to these podcasts, we talk about grooming, we talk about coercion, we talk about coercive control. The grooming of America through music, through justification of pimping, right? Like through the sex positivity, like informed consent, enthusiastic consent. Like, what are we teaching our kids all the time? Like enthusiastic consent. Like, I
Isn't it crazy that sex positivity always means how much degradation another person can take? That's what sex positive
yes.
is like. Well, if they, somebody is choking them and spits in their mouth and makes them eat their own vomit, I'm sure they like it. Like, I know she's crying in the video, but to consenting. She's consenting
She's consenting.
to this. Like it's really crazy. But again, it makes sense. And also this wasn't an accident. Like this is paid for marketing campaigns. Two marketing firms, attorneys are involved in this, lobbyists are involved in this. There are very wealthy traffickers who are very organized. We're seeing this with Epstein. He's not some
He's not the
unicorn.
only one, by the way.
Yeah, he's not a unicorn who's the only
No.
person to ever think of this. Like there there are wealthy people of means who benefit from legalization and full decriminalization. They benefit, and so you have this propaganda, these very basic slogans. Sex work is work. You also we've shifted from using prostitution, so we've completely erased trafficking and exploitation victims. Because if you are a trafficking or exploitation victim, you are not a sex worker. But we are now just a blanket identifying everybody as consenting and choosing with no knowledge out of like being aware and accepting and being on the side of women. Somehow we're erasing all of the black and brown bodies being exploited and trafficked for the benefit of a very small group of people of privilege. The majority of people in prostitution are being trafficked, and I can confidently say that not only because study after study has shown that when asked people in prostitution, regardless who are identifying as choosing, because that's what you do when you're in it, the lowest percentage I've seen was 83% said that they wanted to leave but felt trapped. If you want to leave but feel trapped, if you're trapped there, that is not what enthusiastic consent looks like. But the largest age group of people in the system of prostitution are youth. I feel like that's a no-brainer. We know that youth are easy to groom, easy to trick, and we have a real problem with pedophilia, ephebophilia, all the philias.
Oh, yes.
But the next largest age group is children. The average age that a person enters into prostitution, it varies by state, but it's 12 years old. So, so with the second largest age group being children, 100% of youth would have to be enthusiastically consenting in order for the majority of people in the trade to be there willingly. That is not the case. We know that's
Well,
not the case.
and this is the thing that really frustrates me and angers me about the media and how they handle this situation, right? They keep using the word women. They keep they over objectify the age of
Yeah.
the facts, right? Even if they have their own 12-year-old children, somehow they're somebody else's children. And this really gets back to the point that you made about we all have vulnerabilities, and some of us have these structural vulnerabilities that make us more vulnerable to these things. But I mean, if there is one magic wand thing I could wave, it is to stop calling prostitutes women,
Yeah.
trafficking victims women, right?
Yeah.
Like, or men. We hardly talk about the male aspect of this ever. To your point, there's only 8 beds in the whole nation
Mm-hmm.
to help.
And males are the fastest growing population of trafficking victims right now. So there's been a huge increase in male victimization, and we're just
And they're really boys.
yeah, they're boys and men. Yeah, they're boys. It is boys and men. It's really
God.
yeah. I couldn't tell you what would be enough services. I like just turn the faucet on full blast with services and funding, please, and then
So
we'll see what we can do.
wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah,
Let's
it's
hope I win this bid for Congress so we can actually really go in and slay some shit for funding.
yeah,
Um, uh, I would love for you to talk a little bit as we're rounding out and getting to the end of this conversation. I could talk to you all damn day, honestly. Um, I'd love for you to talk about the Sex Trade Survivor Caucus, the work that you all are doing, and how people can support the work that you're doing.
yeah. I wish that I had. It's probably my least favorite part of the work that I do. I wish that I had like a magic thing that I can point to, and I was like, if you go do this, then it's just gonna like fix it, because hearing all of these things, like having this assumption, oh, there's trafficking happening. Law enforcement comes, they quote unquote rescue the victim, they get them to services, they arrest the trafficker and the buyers, they prosecute them, and everybody lives like happily ever after. And then when we learn that that's just really not how it ever happens at all, in relation to all of this information and knowing all the harms and the millions of dollars that we're going to have to pay out for a single trafficking victim to get their needs met, a level that we are subsidizing prostitution so that a sex buyer can have a $10 blowjob at the drop of a hat. The amount of damage that is caused from this, it is extremely distressing. And what we all want is like this relief, right? We want a way to have the relief from carrying this. It's heavy. Um, and I don't have a magic. I don't have that like magic thing that people can do. But what we really need, what we really, really need, and I wish it was something else, but we need money. We are extremely underfunded. Oregon just had $15 million in VOCA funds cut, which it disrupted all of our trafficking services across the entire state. We are in dire straits.
And
Our
VOCA, for anybody who doesn't know, is victims of crimes. Um, just so people who
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
Um,
Those funds funded the Oregon Department of Justice Human Trafficking Division. The Oregon DOJ, that division created and supported all of the task forces across the state who coordinated their efforts. Because again, there are a lot of rural areas that don't have anything. And so you need to partner with places that do and have these relationships built up and understand services, and create MOUs, the mutual operating understanding agreements that these companies will have. That whole framework and that support just collapsed when those VOCA funds were pulled, and we were already not doing great. Um, what
15
ST
million isn't enough money.
it wasn't enough money to begin with, and then the impact when you're operating in such scarcity, the impact that money has is staggering. It's really devastating what is happening here in Oregon, and it's not just us. This is all across the
No,
country.
but this is where we live. It's where we make our homes. It's where we're raising our
This,
kids. Like,
yeah, that's the impact
we
here.
have to talk about it.
Right. And so, trafficking, it's a multi-billion dollar industry. They rake in more money than, the NBA, MLB, NFL all combined every year. It is massive. They have a lot of money to fight us, which we've seen here in Oregon. There's a wealthy sex buyer who moved here because he thought that Oregon would be the perfect testing ground for legalization of prostitution.
Yeah.
And so he sunk a lot of money into campaigns and a lot of money into trying to pass that here. And we just don't have the finances really to combat that. We do an insane amount of labor for free, which creates a really privileged system that only people who are able to fund their own advocacy will then have a seat at the table,
Right.
which is not the way to inform this work.
Mm.
And so what we really need at the Sex Trade Survivor Caucus is funding. I mean, we're kind of like every anti-trafficking org out here. We are working to draft legislation. We revise legislation. We advise legislators. We advise stakeholders. We train law enforcement. We're training all of the people out here, all the people who are having those interactions. And we're pushing for more services. We're pushing for housing vouchers that are slated for trafficking victims. We got those last year for the first time. We've never had that before. It's really cool. So we're pushing for those things, and it takes time and it takes funding, and it also takes training. We have to train folks behind the scenes. We don't want people learning how to speak to media while being recorded. You don't want folks learning, how to navigate the power imbalance in a room with a senator while telling your story, which is really traumatic, in front of that senator. You really need that support behind the scenes to prepare people on how to navigate that and where to create their own boundaries so they're not causing themselves harm in order to make things better for all of us. And so honestly, that's the best thing that we need right now. We need funding. We need as much support to keep training people.
How can people donate?
Yeah, if they visit our website, www.stscaucus, Sex Trade Survivor Caucus, .org, Then there is a space on our website to donate. We also have some great swag if you're into swag and want to do that. We have some of those components out there. And we also have a training that we do that's called Roadmaps. It's a simulation training. It was written by survivors in collaboration with the Oregon Department of Justice. It's reviewed by the FBI, district attorneys, law enforcement service providers, survivors, and fact check editors. It took us 4 years to make this tool. It is a one of a kind, incredible simulation. So if people want to bring that training to their area, they can learn more about it there as well.
Wow. Well, you are awesome.
Oh, same to you.
Um, I I think it'd be amazing to bring roadmaps down here to Corvallis. So I'd
Oh,
love
we'd love it.
making that happen.
Yeah,
Um, I just want to thank you for your graciousness and your beauty and your courage and your strength and just your willingness to have this conversation with me. It's just a great reminder that those of us who have survived physical and sexual trauma and emotional shit, that we are the fierce answer that this community has been waiting for. And I look forward to raising some hell with you in Oregon, Jay, because I think we're going to do some really cool shit.
same. I'm excited. I'm excited. Thank you so much for having me and giving me this opportunity. These conversations are really important.
They really are important.
Yeah.
And for those of you that are listening, um, thanks for joining us today on The Thinnest Veil. Um, if you want to read my book or read my writing, go to drmelissabird.com. Um, and if you want to follow my congressional campaign, go to melissabirdforcongress.com. I'm going to go have a good cry. Jay, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.